We're live streaming.
Okay.
Just in case.
About
There's a
year
glitch.
ago, we sent out advertisement for bid to do this assessment study. And we finally got it whittled down. I think it was about January or February. Dennis Gowdy is on the advisory board, and Mary. We actually the whole board decided and voted and rated each one of these to come up with ESCI that we hired to do this needs assessment. We haven't had one done in over about 12 years now. They should be reviewed about every 5, but in doing that, we decided to cut part of it out, the impact fee study, and hire a local firm to do that. They wanted to see this report done before they started theirs. They've started their report. That was with Lewis and Young, and they're doing that impact fee study. They figured probably about 2 to 3 months they should have that completed. Station location, that type of thing. So through those few months, we've actually tried to get a lot of information to John that's going to put the presentation on tonight, and it was quite an endeavor to actually do. It was a lot more work and getting information to him than I ever dreamed of. If you actually see the report, it's been on our web for, about 45 days, I want to say. And it's pretty intense. We have made a few changes that we found in the report that was wrong, and I think John will touch on them tonight. But for the most part, I think it's, I know Lewis and Young looked at it, they thought it was great, they thought they'd done an awesome job. So it gives us a roadmap to get there. We just got to figure out the avenues to go down the roadmap. So with that, I'll turn the time over to John. He's going to put the presentation on. He was the main lead guy for the study, spent a lot of hours in the valley, and I'll let him talk to that, I guess, but I like how him doing the sleeping, but he claimed it was. I'll turn the time over to John.
My name is John Stouffer, and I was the project manager on this. And it's the title, it was in the RFP, the title is Master Plan Report. But in reality, this is really an organizational assessment.
John,
So,
could we have you come over here to the microphone?
well, I need to use my clicker. Is there any way to bring the microphone? Otherwise, it'll get all screwed up.
Hopefully we're not going to block your view. It's okay if we do.
I could. The recording would be shared there.
It's about as close as you need to
So I'm being recorded?
You're going out on TV,
I gotta be careful.
countywide.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so really this was more of an organizational assessment, and to be totally honest with you, it was a real pleasure working with this group. Not only the fire department, Wasatch County EMS, county employees, firefighters, good group of people here. Our job was not to tell you what we thought you want to hear, but to tell you what we think is what's best for the community. And so all of our analyses and recommendations are all based on my team. We had a team of about 5 or 6 people working on this. They had different responsibilities. And so this is based on our years of experience, education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm not going to get into every single detail of this report. You'll fall asleep. I'm just going to try to hit on the important elements, what we thought was the most important. Feel free to ask me questions. If I can't answer your question, write it down and get me your contact information, and I will be happy to follow up with it. First thing is that this fire district, this fire department, is not a Cadillac fire department, meaning there's not a whole bunch of fluff here, a bunch of extra people, a bunch of fancy equipment that is really not needed. This is bare minimum. And we do these projects all over the United States and Canada, and I see some departments where they have a lot of unnecessary toys. One department I did up in Canada, just to give you an example, they built a brand new admin building, and they built this 30-foot Sparky the fire dog fiberglass, like a $75,000 giant Sparky out in front of their admin building. Now, I don't know how you can justify that in your budget. I can't imagine going to my bosses and saying, hey, could we put this giant, so you don't see any of that stuff here. But anyway, so these are the main topics in the report, and again, I'm just going to hit the high points. There's like 43 subtopics. It's about a 115-page report with about 90 figures, and so again, I'm not going to go into all the every single detail. And start out with just community and organizational overview. Excuse me. This is the study area, Wasatch County, all of Wasatch County, and the 5 fire stations within the district. So a big issue for us, what we thought was a critical part of this study, was looking at staffing. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about staffing and personnel management. And this is the current admin and support staff. Well, the other thing I should mention is our report is based on the information that we had at the time. And so I know some things have changed subsequent to our report coming out, so I may call on Claire and the chief. They may need to update some of the stuff I say or clarify some of the stuff that I talk about. So as far as administrative and support staff, there's 4 FTEs that represent about 8% of the district. So that is not overkill in terms of admin and support staff. Usually we see around 15% of the fire department, their admin and support staff consists of about 15% is typical. This is emergency response staffing. As you can see, there's 62 total folks in operations. However, 41 of those are paid on call firefighters, volunteers, 11 full-time, and I believe there's more than 11 full-time firefighters now. How many we got now?
19.
Okay. This can take our recommendations. This is a tool we use, and it's a comparison to national and regional medians. And it's how many firefighters per 1,000. And it's not based on, the regional stuff is based on similar fire departments in your region, similar size communities, and the same for the national medians. This is not compared to New York City or Los Angeles. It's compared to similar communities. So the first group over there is the volunteers. So the regional median for volunteers is 1.14 firefighters per 1,000, 1.67 firefighters for the national median per 1,000 as the national median, and Wasatch County is at 0.79 per 1,000 persons in terms of volunteers. Bump over to career, and the regional median is 1 firefighter per 1,000, the national is 1.2, and Wasatch County is 0.33. Obviously that number will change since there's now more career firefighters.
Hey, Ernie, you got those new ones on board, those 8? We went from 11 to 19, are they all on board now?
They are. I'm actually in the 19 budget proposing 3 more.
In addition to the total of 19? Okay.
So Wasatch County EMS has about 41 part-time personnel. I don't know if that's changed, Claire, but at the time that was the number you had.
We're actually down a little bit from that. We've got about 34.
Okay. So staffing for EMS is augmented by Wasatch County Fire, using full-time firefighters who cross-staff the ambulances. So I'm going to not talk a whole lot on budget and finance because, first of all, that stuff really bores me. But if I can't answer your questions, I'll get somebody that can. So this is what we've seen for the last 5 years. Obviously, recurring revenues is the highest volume amount of revenue you get. Non-recurring revenues such as grants and other revenue sources. And 2017 total revenue 4.3 million. Stop me or ask questions if you want. This is historic expenditures from combined funds. So 2017 expenditures, which was the latest data we had at the time, 2.3 million for salary, benefits and taxes. Total recurring expenses 2.7. Total non-recurring 1.4, and for 2017 it was 4.1. So this is Wasatch County EMS transports and billing history. Now this is the data that the billing company provided us originally. And it's a little bit misleading because we had a conference call with them a couple of weeks ago, was it, Claire?
Yeah.
They weren't happy because the numbers weren't reflecting what they had, but that's what they provided us. So in 2017, there was 1,270 billable transports. The average charge per transport was $1,445. The total amount billed was over 1.8 million. Cash collected $785, and the average cash collected per transport was $619, and that showed a collection rate of 42.8%, which seems to have gone down since 2014.
Are these newer numbers then, because they don't reflect what's in the chart?
Correct. These were the, let me mention, I'm glad you asked that question. The chart in your, when I was putting together the slide presentation, I found a number of errors in some of our tables. It's on us. Our quality assurance missed those. So I've corrected all those in the report. I'm going to publish a new PDF version and all new printed versions. So after this presentation tonight, throw away your printed copies. You'll get new ones. Our mistake. So this is the latest one we had, but it's not quite correct because, again, it was based on the numbers they gave us, but it's a little bit misleading because sometimes you have transports that are billed for, well, I'll just focus on 2017. There are transports billed in 2017. You didn't collect the cash until 2018. So I'm not sure if they're using a cash method or an accrual method, but the billing company in our conference call with them said that 2017 collection rate was closer to 50%. A little bit over
52.7.
52 points. Thank you. You memorized that. So it's a lot. It's a lot better than we thought it was, which is really a good thing. So that's a pretty good collection rate.
Can I ask you a question? What is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
national average and what are you basing it on?
I don't think there's a national average. Listen, I'm not aware of a national average. It varies depending on your payer mix by each community. I've seen collection rates at 30%. I did a project in Summit County, Colorado, not Utah, and their collection rate was 60+%. But they have a very affluent community. None of the firefighters or EMS providers actually can afford to live in that county. So they get a much better collection rate. So it depends upon your payer mix.
I just know the Salt Lake Valley is much lower than that. I'm from Oregon, we were like in 40%. And we were actually doing pretty good.
We got to look at the demographics, just like you said. The demographics here are a lot different than Salt Lake Valley.
And when we looked at that originally, and again, it was based on the numbers they gave us, we thought, yeah, that doesn't look good. and that the billing company should be more aggressive in collections, but I think they're doing okay, which is another thing we're going to change in the report. So,
John, can I just make a point?
Sure.
To the public who doesn't really understand as far as collections, even 52.7 doesn't sound like a lot, but understanding that Medicaid, Medicare, they'll only pay a certain amount. You can bill whatever you want, but they'll only pay a certain amount. And so, and then you have your bad payer mix in there, bad debt.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a really good point, because if you don't understand how it works, you know, you can bill a patient a Medicaid patient or Medicare patient $5,000. Doesn't matter. You're going to get whatever the feds pay or the state or whatever. So if you have collection rates of over 50% consistently, that's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good. Anything else on that? Questions, comments? So this is, again, based on the data we had at the time. This is if you combine Wasatch County Fire District with Wasatch County EMS. This is status quo revenue and expense projections. This is what we projected after 2018.
I don't understand what you just said. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
You're assuming this is combining.
This was if you combined, and we'll talk more about merging. If you merged the two organizations into one and maintained status quo, current staffing, current everything, this is what we projected out through 2023.
So you took the EMS budget and added it to the fire district budget?
Correct.
Gotcha.
The budgets and revenue and expenditures. So for 2019, 4.3 million in revenue. That would probably go much higher, because we could probably, now that we know better ambulance collection rates, you could probably add 7 or 8% to that. So over $300,000 more to that revenue. So that's probably closer to 4.6 or better.
Can I ask a question on revenues?
Mm-hmm.
So the recurring revenue, is that tax?
That's based on that previous slide,
Right,
where it's all your different recurring revenue sources. Or are you asking me now?
well, I'm trying to figure out which is which. On the EMS, the only one I'm familiar with really is the EMS, and so we collect so much, which I assume is a recurring revenue?
Right, right. Ambulance billing.
And then the county has been taking from the general fund and putting money in. Is that a non-recurring or a recurring?
That's one of those questions I have to ask my finance guy if he combined those two.
How do you determine the increase in revenue?
It's based on a based on a percentage in past historical growth.
And the expenses.
And again, it's one of those finance questions
The
that
expenses are based on the same percentage?
same thing. You look at historical expenditures in the previous 5 years, and typically expenditures, I think you apply a 3% increase over the next 5-10 years, or 5 years. But if that doesn't answer your question, let me know, and I will find out for sure. So total expense is 4.3. So this is for 2019, which would show a deficit, but I don't think that's accurate. That'll, with the better collection rates, we'll do better than that. So one of the biggest challenges, excuse me, one of the biggest challenges in this study was getting incident data. And that's just really, really critical to get complete, thorough incident data. And so we had two primary data sources. The fire data came from the State Fire Marshal's office, and the EMS data came from the Bureau of EMS. And so there's probably some duplication in the volume, the numbers, in terms of between the two incident data sets, but we have no way of filtering those out. State agencies typically collect a limited amount of incident data. So it doesn't give you the whole picture. because both data sets missing really important data elements that prevented more accurate and detailed analysis. I'll talk a little bit more about it and when we get into some other slides. And we tried to get CAD data from the Sheriff's Department, but they refused to give us the data. So we had to go with what we had. So the lack of significant or comprehensive data was a big challenge in this. This was Fire District's historical service demand by type, based on the data we had. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. So most incidents, fires, alarms, public assist, etc., remain relatively even, but EMS calls tended to increase every year, which we would have expected. This is Fire District service demand by hour. We look at what we call temporal data, temporal analysis, where we look at number of calls by month, by day of the week, and by hour. The months of July and December had the highest service demand in Wasatch County, but June, August, September, and October were not too far behind those. As far as hourly demand, this follows a typical pattern that you find in most communities. Service demand is generated by those periods of time where human activity is at its highest. So the busiest 12-hour period for the fire department was between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. And this is valuable when you start talking about staffing and scheduling and that sort of thing. So this is incident density. It's a GIS study where we look at where all the calls happened in 2016 and 2017 combined. As expected, the highest incident density was around Heber City, Midway, and of course the more rural areas had much lower call volumes. And this is all call types, fires, EMS, everything. One thing we do is we project travel times. Travel time is from the time a unit is first dispatched until the vehicle arrives on scene. So this GIS study projects, when we look at all the roads and the speed limits and that sort of thing, it's so from each one of those stations, each one of the 5 stations, this is how far you can potentially get in those time periods. So certainly Heber City and Midway are well covered. You can get to most areas around Heber City and Midway within 8 minutes or less. And the same applies to the other, to Jordanelle, but Timber Lakes and Wallsburg, you can get there if you have a staffed unit there and they can respond right away. But actually you don't have to respond right away. That's how long it'll take to go from those stations within so many minutes.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I just can't see on the map exactly where the...
Yeah, it's hard to show on a slide.
From the Jordanelle station to the east side of the Jordanelle Basin, where is that falling in that?
It shows you can get to the east side within, if you look at the map, you can see it. You can get there within 8 minutes or less. Some areas within 4 minutes or less.
To the east side of the Jordanelle, from the Jordanelle station going all the way up 40 miles?
Based on our map. Disagree with that?
It's 16 miles.
Yeah.
It's green up there. It's 10 to 12.
10 to 12.
Oh, are you talking about way over there?
I'm talking about the east side of the Jordanelle Reservoir.
Where the double line is.
I don't have a pointer, I can't.
That's 10 to 12.
If you're talking up in the green area, up in the northeast area, and you're talking within 12 minutes or less of travel. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and that's why I say it's very hard to see it on that.
It is, I'm sorry.
That's
Oh,
okay.
who's got the laser
Right
pointer?
here.
I'm talking about like Hideout, the areas, Deer Vista, Deer Mountain, those areas.
So are you talking about this area right in here?
Yes.
Yeah, you can see that it's 10 to 12 minute or less travel time to get up into that area. Make sense?
No, but okay. If that's what you...
Yeah, I mean, no, please tell me what you're thinking.
I just want to be sure you took into consideration those areas. Right now, you have to go up 40 to 248 and come all the way back down to get to Hideout, to get to Deer Vista, to get to Deer Mountain, to get to all those developments.
But the parkway's going to be finished, what, next year?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully that will cut the time down. I'm just talking about for right now.
Yeah.
Well, I can ask my GIS guy, but it's pretty sophisticated software.
Sure. I just wanted to know those areas were included in it.
Yeah, what we do is we include how far can you get from each station in terms of minutes from travel time. That is from the time they leave the station till they arrive on scene.
Right.
And so that's what the GIS study projects. But I can,
Okay. No,
I can ask you.
Ernie, did those response times look accurate too? Particularly with regards to what she's asked
The
about.
Hideout, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, Hideout's clear on the east side, and that's, I mean, it and Tuhei, we actually have those reciprocal agreements with them. They actually have responded to incidents over there. A lot depends on the time of day. I mean, if it's night, the traffic's low, it's a little quicker. If it's during the day, it's a little slower. I mean, you have to fight that traffic going up the hill on both sides, even like she says, 248. I mean, it's depending on the time of day. I mean, sometimes 248 is pretty busy. I mean, with all the construction going on there, but nighttime, unless you hit a deer, you can sail right along.
Who's the reciprocal
And
agreements?
that's assuming that there's a...
Park City?
That's assuming that someone's in the Jordanelle station, that they're not having to come from one of the other stations.
Correct.
Right?
These are projected potential travel times. It's possible, based on GIS mapping, that you could get to those areas within a certain amount of time. It's not the actual travel time forms. This is a whole different ballgame. So here's response time performance for all incident types. Now, we use what's called a fractile method of determining response times, different times, because it's much more accurate than using average. We put average in there just as an FYI, but fractile is the most, fractile is not an actual word, it's an industry term, but essentially we measure we look at the majority of calls at the 90th percentile. Because if you use averages, you can have high numbers and low numbers, and it skews the average. It doesn't give you an accurate picture of what your real performance is. So we use the fractile method, which is the top line there. And then below that is average. Now, the true national definition of response time, total response time, is from the time the call is received at the 911 center until the first unit arrives on scene. That's the national definition. Unfortunately, we couldn't include alarm handling times. And alarm handling time is the interval, the period between when the 911 center picks up the phone and they dispatch the first unit. So that adds time to the total response time. That makes sense?